Hey guys, so today I just want to go over some ideas to do with power chords, how you can get them to sound a bit better, more powerful, as the name implies, and as well as that, just address some of the common problems that people tend to have when learning these for the first time. So to begin with, let's take a power chord on the 3rd fret of the low E. So that would mean our first finger is on the 3rd fret of the low E, and then our 3rd finger, or our pinky, doesn't matter for now, can be on the 5th fret of the A. Right, so these two notes would be a power chord, and a G power chord more specifically. Now, the first problem a lot of people run into when learning these is the actual stretch going from, well, basically a 2-fret span. Because a lot of the chords we learn when we're starting guitar are, G, D, A, E minor, E major, we're just spanning over 2 frets, okay? We're not stretching across, apart from ones like C, right? C we're going to be stretching a bit, and D minor, you stretch a bit for that, but it's a bit different. So first problem is people will always say, oh, maybe my hands are too small to play power chords. That's never the case. It's always the case of wrist position. Okay, I've talked about this before, but your wrist position is what's going to allow your fingers to spread laterally or across that way, right, with much more ease. Okay, so if we think about hand anatomy, I guess, if your wrist is up like this, okay, if I have my wrist in this bent position, it's very hard for me to spread my first finger and pinky apart. Okay, next to impossible. But if I have my wrist in what's called a collapsed position or bent like this, all of a sudden my hand can spread out like that. And if I try bring my hand up, it's not going to work. Okay, now different story if I was having my fingers vertical. I can have my wrist bent and my fingers can stretch or like go down like that. That's why it works really well for like a G chord, having your thumb up like this, or a D chord, just A chord, any chord where you're playing down that way, so vertically as opposed to laterally, right? So when you're playing these power chords, if you're struggling to make that stretch, first thing is to check that you have that collapsed wrist position. Okay, if your thumb's up like this, you're just going to have a real hard time making that stretch. And often when people do this, it just solves the problem like that. But it will feel a bit odd to begin with and might feel a bit more unstable, but just stick with it. Okay, so that's the first step with our power chord. Okay, wrist position, that's going to help a lot. Now the next thing that's important is once you've got your power chord, is learning how to actually make them sound powerful, right? Because there is a big difference. Let's say we take Iron Man. Okay, this is a very common riff that you'll probably learn when you're learning power chords. There's a difference between going like this versus this. Right, big difference in the sound. And you might be thinking, oh, you're just strumming harder. And yes, you're kind of right, but it's a bit more complicated than that. So sticking with our power chord that we're playing on the 3rd fret, okay, what we have to try to do is get out of the habit of only playing the 2 strings, so the E and A. Okay, what we want to be able to do is strum the most of the strings on the guitar, but only be hearing those 2 notes. Okay, that is the goal, because it's very hard to play guitar aggressively if you're worrying about only playing 2 strings as opposed to just being able to go like this, right? There's a big difference. And like honestly, most of guitar, especially once you get into a lot of lead stuff, or the way I like to play lead stuff, is it's about muting the strings you don't want to hear as opposed to just playing the ones you want to hear. I could play one note on the 7th fret on the G. I could either just pick that single string, or I could, right, really dig in, playing all the strings and just blocking the other ones. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. So what you have to be able to do in order to play these power chords like that, being able to strum the whole guitar and whatnot, is you have to learn to block all the other strings. Now, the way we're going to do that, we're actually just going to start with our first finger on the 3rd fret, is we want to use the rest of this first finger to be lightly touching all these other strings, so they make that kind of sound, a deadened sound, right? So, at the moment, I have my fingertip, or not actually my fingertip, more the middle part of my finger, which allows me to keep the rest of my finger straight. I have that on the 3rd fret, and then I'm just lightly touching the other strings. Okay, so when I play the whole guitar, right, you can only hear that one note. Okay, again, if I'm not doing this properly, it's going to sound like this. Right, not so great. So that's what you want to try to do first, is just take that one note. Okay, so again, using more the middle part of the finger, and then we're blocking the other strings with the rest of the finger. Okay, so you should be able to strum the whole guitar with just more the bottom strings and only hear that one note. Cool? Now, if you're struggling to do this, which you will be, okay, when you're first learning it, so don't just try it once and then be like, this video sucks, I can't do it. No, you'll have to put some time into this. It might take a few weeks to get familiar with this, so just stick with it. Anyway, so you want to be using more the middle part, or like the pad of your finger, as opposed to your fingertip. When we're first learning chords, we learn to use our fingertips because it helps us not block the other notes in the chord. This is actually the opposite. We want to be doing the opposite, so we're using more the middle part so that we are actually blocking the other strings. Right, so once you get that one note, then you can add in the next note in the power chord, okay, while trying to keep that same finger position. Right, so now when I'm playing all the strings one at a time, I'm hearing this note, then the rest are muted. Right, and this is how I can strum the whole guitar but only hear those two notes. Right, now it might take a little while for you to get used to being able to block all the strings with this finger and then putting that finger down, but again, just stick with it. And also you can use your pinky, okay, that's fine. Nothing wrong with playing a power chord with your pinky. That's good too. So that's the first step, right? So just let's recap. So using more the middle part of your finger, using the rest of this first finger to block the other strings. Right, not like this. We shouldn't be hearing the other strings, they should be blocked. Get used to strumming the bottom part of the guitar or all the strings and only hearing that one note. And then once you can do that, try that other note in, right? Alright, then you can strum the whole guitar just hearing those notes. Now, one other thing that I want to mention is that when we go on to playing power chords, or when you're playing power chords on the A string, okay, because oftentimes power chords are going to be built from the E string using the E and A string, or the A string using the A and D string, we're going to run into a new problem. Okay, so all the same logic applies in that we want to use the rest of our first finger to be blocking these higher strings. But what about this string? Okay, we can't use the bottom part of this finger to block this, so we kind of run into a new problem. Now, the way you solve this and you block that E string so that you can strum those power chords on the A string is you want to use the tip of this first finger to be lightly touching it. So you'll see the top of my finger is ever so slightly touching that E string enough to mute it, so that in the context of a strum of a power chord, you're not going to hear it at all. So first, again, you can start with just one note, okay, just trying to play that on the A string, right, and strumming the whole guitar but only hearing that one note. Now, a common mistake is that people think they need to be using way too much of the top of their finger to be blocking that low E string. You only need to be using the very tip, okay? It doesn't take much to block a string. So experiment with the part of the finger that you're using to play the note, and you got to kind of find the sweet spot where you're using the middle part of it so you can use the tip of that finger. But if you use too much of the fingertip, okay, you're not going to be able to reach up to play that, to block that E string. So you just got to kind of experiment, right? And then you can add the next note in, and now you have your power chords on the A string too. Okay, so let's just go over all of this quickly just to recap, and you can actually apply this to your playing and practice sessions. So first of all, our 3rd fret on the E string, okay, just trying to strum the whole guitar, only hearing that note, blocking the rest of the strings with that. And of course, you can move this stuff around, practice it in different areas of the fretboard, but the 3rd fret or 5th fret tends to be a good starting point. Then once you can do that, add in that 3rd finger on the A string, right? try to do that. Then head over to the A string with our first finger on the 3rd fret, right? And this introduces the problem of the E string, which we use the tip of our first finger to dry block, right? And then we add in the next note. Cool. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful, just some tips with the power chords. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and as well as that, if you have any ideas for videos or separate topics that you would like to be covered. But as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.